Well, football is back, and for the first time, sports betting is now legal in New Jersey. And while it won't change how you cheer for your favorite team, it will change the way you watch the NFL. So every Saturday this season, we will be educating you on the best research methods and give you some insights. So let's start things off with a professional sports bettor and the co-founder of the Bet the Board podcast. Payne Insider joins us from Vegas. Payne, good to have you on the show.
I appreciate you having me. How's everything going?
All is well, but I feel like the first week of the NFL season is always the toughest to handicap because you have less information to build from, but still, maybe the most intriguing game has to be this Pittsburgh-Cleveland matchup. The line has moved from 7 down to 4. We know that Le'Veon Bell isn't going to be playing in this game, but should that move the line that much?
It should not, and especially in week 1, right? This is a guy who sat out all offseason. He wouldn't have been in game shape. He wouldn't have been up to game speed. So a lot of that is perception. We saw this with him last year. He just wasn't game ready, only had 3.1 yards per touch his first 2 games, working his way back. I think James Conner is more than fit to fill his shoes here. But you also get just market perception. The Browns were on Hard Knocks, so that's a big dynamic playing its role here. The other thing is I just think the Browns are going to be much better. We've got to figure out how much better. That's the big question here. With Tyrod Taylor, he just does not turn the ball over, and that was the problem for the Browns last year. 41 giveaways. So Tyrod protects the ball, and there is talent around him. So I think that's what we're seeing here. It's a mix of the Browns certainly being better,
right,
and then the perception of Hard Knocks playing a role.
Well, how about the Colts game? I mean, this is a team that's 2.5-point favorites at home to the Bengals. Andrew Luck's had a handful of good series in the preseason, but is that really enough to convince you that the Colts are a different team?
It's not at this point. And early in the summer, this line was Colts -1. Everyone saw him. It looked like he was ready to go. He put back on good weight, and this line shot out to 3. At this point, though, we saw Andrew Luck play in the preseason. He looks a little rusty. He wasn't throwing the ball deep down the field. It looks like he's pretty limited within about a 15-yard area to throw the ball. And at that point, professional bettors have been all over the Cincinnati Bengals at that point, getting him a key number of 3. And that's why we're back down to about 2.5 across the board.
3 games right now going off at a touchdown or more. Green Bay -7 over the Bears. Saints -9.5 over Tampa. Baltimore -7.5 over the Bills. 2 of those games are division games. Does that give you any pause to put money on the favorites?
It does a little bit, and I can tell you right now, one of those games that you mentioned, the Sunday night football game, Chicago-Green Bay, that is attracting professional money. It was 8.5, 9 at one point. We're now down to as low as 7. Professional bettors really love what the Chicago Bears did in the offseason. You bring in Matt Nagy, who is just a well-respected offensive mind. He retained Vic Fangio, really, really elite defensive coordinator. Then obviously you trade for Khalil Mack and you get Roquan Smith in the draft. So a lot of bettors like the Chicago Bears this year. It might not reflect it in the win-loss column because the schedule is very difficult, but they're going to be much improved on the field for sure.
You can hear all of his thoughts for every game on his podcast, Bet the Board. Payne Insider, thanks so much, and we'll talk to you again next week, buddy.
Appreciate it. Talk soon.
All right, we're also joined in studio by the co-host of I'll Take That Bet from the Action Network, Chris Raybon, in studio. Chris, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And we're going to kind of continue the conversation that we just had with Payne. I mean, we were talking about the favorites, and maybe NFL is the most impacted, the NFL bets, I should say, are most impacted by the public opinion. Where do you land on that? How much value do you put in that information?
I think it is actually pretty valuable because you can actually look at public percentages and see that a certain amount of tickets are on one side, but a lot of the money is on the other side. And a perfect example of that is the Chicago Bears-Green Bay Packers game. Only about 25% of the money is on Green Bay, but 55% of the tickets is. So
the smart money is on Chicago.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a little bit surprising because some of those teams, especially those powerhouse teams, you would think would be able to collect a lot of the money, or at least a lot of the betting audience.
Yeah, so that's what it is. They collect a lot of the tickets, but those tickets are, maybe $10, $20, $50 tickets, but then a sharp bettor comes along and puts, $5, $10 grand on it. That's going to move the line more than the public. So the public is really moving lines when it's a whole lot of people around one particular team, such as the Cleveland Browns, for example, going on Hard Knocks. There was just a flood of public bettors coming in and betting on them.
So you want to bet against the public?
Absolutely. That's how you win. The public bets on overs about 80% of the time. They bet on favorites about 80% of the time. The real money is made when you're betting on the underdogs and the unders.
The hype machine is really high on the Giants right now. They are only 3.5-point dogs to a Jaguars team that was a play away from the Super Bowl. How do you read that game?
I think that game is going to be a close game, but I still think the Jaguars got it. I mean, if you look at Jalen Ramsey and everyone on that defense, I think it's too soon. The Giants, this is their first game with a new coach, a new coordinator on both sides of the ball.
How about the Jets? Because, look, they're 6.5-point dogs right now in Detroit. Historically, rookies in season openers have been terrible. It doesn't matter if your name is Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, Deshaun Watson, Jameis Winston. You do not have a good game in your NFL debut, especially if it's on the road. However, do you think that Sam Darnold can keep the Jets within a touchdown of the Lions?
I actually do, and it's more so to do with the Lions' defense. Outside of Darius Slay, they have had some issues, run defense, but it's interesting because you kind of mentioned it. The line opened at 7, and sharps were all over that, and that's what really moved the line down. And not only did the line go down, but the over-under went up. So people think the Jets can not only stay within a touchdown, but that they can score a lot of points, too.
So do you think that people are buying what they're reading in the newspaper, more or less?
Maybe. I mean,
the coaches are confident, obviously. At this point, almost every coach is confident in their player, and they're clearly building the confidence of Darnold. But do you think that that has it's overflowed into the reporting and then into the betting as well?
Well, one thing that's interesting is that point differential, how much a team outscores the other team by over a season is actually more predictive of wins in the next season than their actual win-loss record, right? So before Bryce Petty came in those first 12 games with Josh McCown, the Jets were playing about a 7-8 win level as a team. So I think they're not as bad as people think, and that's why the sharp bettors are all over them, because they don't think Darnold is any worse than McCown.
All right, both the Ravens and the Bills were 9-7 last year. The Bills were the team that makes the playoffs, but the Ravens are big favorites this week. Okay, Vegas has each team's win total pretty much about the same, 7-8, yet the matchup is supposed to be a blowout. Do you see any red flags here?
Well, actually, the Bills win total, it's been bet down a lot since it came out. I think it opened at 6.5, and it's been bet down to 6 and then to 5.5 at some books. So a lot of that has to do with Nathan Peterman. Tyrod Taylor was a guy who didn't turn the ball over. These quarterbacks, Nathan Peterman turned it over 5.5 times. So I think when you look at the Bills, again, point differential. They had the point differential last year of a 6-win team.
Well, considering Flacco and Peterman, you've got to draw information from all over the place, including daily fantasy. And if Flacco and Peterman are two of the lowest-rated quarterbacks in daily fantasy, it stands to reason there's not going to be a lot of points scored in this game. Would that lead you to believe that the 40 on the over-under is probably smarter to play the under?
Not necessarily, because the over-under opened a few points higher than that, and it's already kind of been bet down a little bit. And you have to remember, too, that offense is not the only one who's scoring points. The defense can score points. And the Ravens were actually one of the higher-scoring teams in the league last season, and you wouldn't expect that given how bad of a season Joe Flacco had. But their defense put him in a lot of good field position and scored a lot of touchdowns.
Well, it's going to be fun to watch. It is the first week, and I'm sure by next week we're going to have a lot to break down from the Action Network and the host of I'll Take That Bet. Chris Raybon, thank you so much for your insights, man.
Thank you.
All right, stick around. We'll be back in a minute.